Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, the 6th of September 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish, with me in the studio, Mike Robinson. We will be joined by live video Skype link by David Ellis from Strategic Defence Initiatives. I've missed the weather, Mike. The weather is a little bit grey. I'm being asked to report the weather, so I'm going to carry on doing it. It's sunny in Holland, that's what we've been told. It's nearly sunny in Surbiton. It's a little bit grey and overcast here in Plymouth, but at least the rain has gone and the mist has lifted. Well, there we are. So what is the situation in UK at the moment? One of the subjects that UK Column has consistently pushed forward is child abuse. Why have we stuck to that subject? Because along with that famous statement of following the money, child abuse leads us to the machinery at the heart of British government, which is the abuse of children, but also, of course, blackmail, which follows it. So it's very interesting to see that the Times has led on an article about former chair of the Child Sexual Abuse Inquiry. Here she is, Lowell Goddard, and she's had this to say, that the National Public Inquiry into Child Sex Abuse is too big, unwieldy and underfunded to succeed, and it must be overhauled. One of the figures that the paper mentions is 100 million. Apparently there's millions of pages of evidence, but not a single witness has been interviewed yet. But of course, the theme consistently coming out of central government is, well, there really isn't any child abuse. Certainly nobody within Westminster has been involved in child abuse. Nobody in senior positions within the police or the civil service have been interviewed. And we're now 39 days into the stunning silence from both the Prime Minister and the Home Office with regard to the statement by the very brave Metropolitan Police whistleblower. We're going to follow this on through to the Keith Vaz situation, but overall it seems to be that the government is either totally silent on the suggestion that there is child abuse. And what do you think Goddard is doing here? Muddying the waters a bit to get further delay, Mike, or is she being honest?
A bit of both, perhaps. There's perhaps a little bit of truth in that quote.
Maybe there is. Well, let's have a look at another lady. Here she is, Alison Saunders, head of the Crown Prosecution Service. And she's not really worried about child abuse. She's apparently worried about revenge porn. And she's very concerned, deeply concerned, in fact, to the growing trend for offences from rape to harassment to be instigated or committed online. I'm not sure how you commit rape online, but presumably she knew what she was talking about. And she goes on, she says that Facebook and Twitter are being used to humiliate, control and threaten victims. Of course, there's no mention of that happening to child abuse whistleblowers in prison. And she's got serious concerns about how the internet and social media sites are becoming the hunting ground for a new generation of rapists, perverts and stalkers. None of those in Westminster then, Mike?
No, none in Westminster. The other thing that she was talking about this morning, Brian, was Cliff Richard, because obviously all charges or the Crown Prosecution Service said that there were no charges to be placed, there were no charges to be answered. But one of his alleged victims has put a complaint in to the Crown Prosecution Service about that. And so they have reopened that analysis of the evidence. But she is pretty keen to stress that process will take no more than 2 weeks.
Yeah, we'll get that squashed pretty quickly.
Yes.
And presumably if the victim persists with their allegations, they can be put in prison quite quickly. Well, against that background, let's bring on the star of the moment, which is Keith Vaz. And here we are. He's hopped out of the flat with the rent boys and mention of drugs. He's put on presumably a clean shirt and tie and a suit, and he's back in the House of Commons to represent his constituents and act on a world stage to show just what British MPs are made of. So no what? No remorse, no embarrassment, just get out there in front of the public and carry on as if nothing is wrong.
Absolutely.
Right. David, we'll bring you in here. What do you make of Mr. Vaz? We've got a little bit more to say about him, but what's your take on what he's done?
He very definitely seems to be making his position perfectly clear for everyone to see. So
it's just acceptable. This is one of the things I'd like to pick up on. We're seeing this on social media. A lot of people say, well, if that's what the man does at home, if what people do at home is their own business. Well, is it?
Right. So yeah, sorry, David, this raises a good question that perhaps both of you could comment on, and that is, do MPs or people that are working allegedly in the public service, do they have the right to a private life, which means that they can carry on as if, doing whatever they choose to do in private, as long as the public doesn't get to hear about it? I mean, surely it is the case that if you have a public role, whatever the activities that you get up to in your private life have a bearing on the decisions that you may make in your public role, and there is a public interest in knowing what those activities may be.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, that is absolutely correct. That's very succinct. Yes, people are, it's perfectly entitled and reasonable to have a private life, and what they do in their own private bed chambers is a private matter, absolutely. However, and this is where the however is, very few people are MPs, and you would expect them to be doing their job, as we've said this time and time again. And moreover, if they're chairing a committee, just how they conduct themselves is of a different level of scrutiny. So if it was me, I think, I'd really, if it was the boot was on the other foot and you'd made a big faux pas, you'd consider your position, wouldn't you? But no doubt Mr. Vaz has got a different opinion and is going to come out with a different statement. But, I just, frankly, I think some of the things that are happening now, we're getting to the stage where the general public can just see exactly what's going on here in Whitehall, and really, are they seeing through it? Because I personally, just don't, I'm not finding this acceptable, because he's chairing a committee. Just don't know.
Well, he's been involved in a number of committees, hasn't he, David? And one of the committees that he's been involved in is to do with the sex industry and whether there should be more rights for sex workers. And so one could imagine that he might be biased in his decision. So even if you come in at a very gentle level and say, well, this man's not declaring his full interests, and yet he's putting opinion in which is going to affect social policy, I'm going to call it that, which is going to affect the rest of us in this country. But I'm just going to come back to this business that what you do in your own house is your own affair. Well, that's absolutely not true, of course, because you're not allowed to abuse children in your own house. You're not allowed to beat up your partner or your wife in your own house. So this is a complete smokescreen that some people are trying to use. And of course, Mr. Tatchell has been heavily or trying to defend Keith Vaz on this basis that, well, if a politician, wants to get involved with a few prostitutes, that's perfectly normal in Mr. Tatchell's opinion, and we should just ignore it. What it represents, of course, is the start of slippery slope to breakdown of morality in society. And one or two members of the public are picking up on probably the real issue, which is this. But look who's had to report it. This is Guido Fawkes here on his site. Secondly, this guy has been chairman of the Home Affairs Select Committee since 2007. This scrutinises counter-terror policing, surveillance policy and usage, and MI5, amongst other things. How the F did he get the security clearance? Good question. Now, I find this particularly interesting because, of course, the military, people involved in the military get vetted to see what their background is, and they want to know everything. The more you have access to classified material, the tougher that vetting is. They want to know about any indiscretions, any nasty little habits that people might have, because, of course, you could be blackmailed. So quite rightly, somebody here is saying, well, has Mr. Vaz been blackmailed? Has he? We have no idea. Are we seeing the tip of an iceberg with what he's been involved in? We don't know. But of course, something is very serious here, that a man with access to the information he has access to, is he being blackmailed? Well, the exchange went on. We've taken a couple more shots off of that Guido site, encourage people to go and have a look at it. Foxhole said here, indeed. And then somebody saying, well, probably all the major powers are actually interested in this man. And of course, we've had our own government warning that those nasty Russians, Mike, are putting in women to entrap people, and even China. And I think Theresa May was told to undress under the covers because the Chinese might be taking pictures of her body in order to blackmail her. Sorry, your bottom lip trembling there. But this is a serious stuff. And then, of course, we're really starting to see the public put the pieces together. Perhaps those major powers might be good enough to tell us who accompanied Cyril Smith and Greville Janner to children's party at the Elm Guest House, where, of course, children were abused. So at the end of the day, it's taking the British public and Guido Fawkes to really get in amongst this stuff. David, this is a key issue, isn't it? That people with dirty little secrets, highly vulnerable to being blackmailed. And of course, once that blackmail starts, they're not going to be telling anybody about it. The whole point of blackmail is you control somebody utterly.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is it. Are we? Is this about control and blackmail? And we've got to sort of look very slightly back into history to Jack Profumo with the Profumo affair, and Evgeny Ivanov, the Russian naval attaché, Manuel Davis, Christine Keeler. This is sort of Jack Profumo. The minute this breached, there appears to be some very serious inner workings with it. Maybe all was not as it exactly seems, but the bottom line was, of course, is the guy was gone very, very quickly. The political knife fell through him so swiftly that he didn't even feel it. So, this is, did we have some kind of better governance then than what we do now? This is the question, and really, it's telling a story of just sort of what's going on within the Labour Party, really, and Whitehall and Parliament in general. Really, are we getting on and are we addressing the serious stuff? As I said originally, Mr. Vaz's position. I mean, and he's made it very, very clear what his views are on those issues that he's overseen in that committee. So you're quite right, Brian, with what you've said. So I just, it's so frustrating on so many different levels because we're seeing this through other committees. This is not just the only committee where we're wondering, what on earth's going on. So it's begging more questions actually than it's answering. Yeah.
Well, you've mentioned Christine Keeler, and of course, the whole of the Profumo affair was neatly packaged and covered up with Jack Profumo. The pictures were never brought out into the public domain. This is pictures taken with an early Polaroid camera at orgies, and at those orgies were members of Parliament and indeed senior members of the establishment, highly rumoured to be top members of the royal family. All of that swept under the carpet, kept away from the public. But if anybody would like to read Christine Keeler's book, which, if my memory serves me correctly, was called The Truth at Last, one of the interesting topics which she touches upon is it wasn't only girls and prostitutes that were being provided for these people, there were also children being provided in the circle. So fascinating, going way back to the 60s, as you say, we're starting to see the same picture then, same picture now. Ultimately, what it's telling us is that we're being ruled by a criminal political elite who think they're above the law. Well, let's have a look at the focus on the mention of intelligence services. So let's bring in Mr. Keith Vaz again. Is he a blackmail risk? Well, of course, are we going to get any work out of MI5? I'm not so sure about this. This was the Mail report, which says secret files show MI5 let abuse claim MP off the hook. security chief said the case would, quote, embarrass the government. So this is the reality of it, that the security services, which ought to be protecting the nation by rooting out people who are perverted or at risk of blackmail, they're not doing their job. And if we go over the water to King Cora Boys' Home, of course, we've got exactly the same story, with the added twist that it was the security services who were helping ensure that the abuse of children continued so that they could blackmail and control politicians. So we're hardly going to get the chair of the Joint Intelligence Committee, who's responsible for MI5 and security services, doing his job, because it goes around in one big circle. I'll just say to our audience, our viewers and listeners today, you might like to go and have a look at Mr. Charles Farr, chair of the Joint Intelligence Committee, because if we go back in his career, he was handing out money in Afghanistan, apparently to stop the poppy crops, Mike. But I believe you had some statistics which showed that ever since UK and the US have been involved, the poppy crop has flourished.
Indeed.
Indeed. So I'll just add a headline for that one, that Charles is far more interested in spying on the public than blackmail risks, because this is the other thing this man has been doing, is pushing for the security services to have more and more access to public communications, our internet, our emails. They want to know, but why do they want to know? David, some of this stuff is getting a little bit too obvious, that we've got a cabal of elitists who are keen to know everything about the lives of the public, but they are there protecting the rather grubby lives of our politicians.
Yeah, well, it's inverted, isn't it? Rather than getting on with the job, and it's inward looking to the people. It's not outward looking. So for all of the current government, and whether they are actually the government or not, whether Mrs. May and her cabinet are the actual government, and whether they're going to, in essence, act and do that, or whether they're just a facade or a front, remains to be seen at the moment.
Yeah.
But clearly, a lot of these establishments and these offices and agencies are inward looking to the people. And where's the justification for this? Who are the people threatening?
Terrorists.
Well, it's upside down, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, we're going to be coming on to the subject terrorism in a minute. We'll just finish off Mr. Vaz. And of course, we better bring in Mr. Tatchell. We mentioned this yesterday. Here he is saying that Vaz hasn't done anything wrong. His standards are perfectly acceptable. He should just go back to work. Well done, Mr. Tatchell. And here's some of his defence. So this is a tweet. He said, "Did the Sunday Mirror pay $30,000 for the male escort story?" So he's doing his bit to help muddy the water, get the blame back on the papers, get the heat off his friend, Mr. Vaz. And then we warned about this yesterday, and here it comes. This is the attack on the press to help kickstart Leveson. So this little tweet here says, "Has anything changed since the Leveson inquiry?" And that tweet is off the exchange that Peter Tatchell was involved in. So very interesting. We've got dirt in Parliament, thoroughly disreputable MP, Mr. Vaz, didn't know anything about the abuse of children in Islington. He was legal officer, but he didn't know, Mike. Along comes Peter Tatchell to defend him. I think I get a little bit of a picture coming.
Well, okay, let's move on to the House of Lords then. And this is Total Politics. And Norman Fowler, Lord Fowler as he is now, of course he was part of the Tory cabinet from the 80s and 90s. And he is calling for what he's describing as a major House of Lords cull. He's saying there are too many people in the House of Lords. Well, that's true. He said, "I don't think that we can justify a situation where you have over 800 peers at the same time that you're bringing down the Commons to 600 MPs." And there he's talking about the boundary changes to MPs' constituencies that are going to see 50 MPs lose their jobs pretty soon, hopefully. He said, "The principle, it seems to me, is that we should have fewer Lords. We should certainly not have more peers than there are members of Parliament. I think that's a principle that we probably find agreement amongst most of the House. Well, look, what is this about? This is about the continuing pressure on the House of Lords for so-called reform, because what they want to do is replace the House of Lords with an unelected Senate. Now, of course, the criticism about the House of Lords is that peers are unelected, they're appointed. Why are there so many? There are so many peers because, well, beginning with Tony Blair's House of Lords reforms at the end of the 90s, when he got rid of the hereditary peers, most of them anyway, and replaced them with appointed peers. Then we started seeing life peers coming in, some Conservatives, some Labour, some Liberal Democrats, other parties represented, some crossbenchers as well that don't have any party affiliation, and they just filled them up with these people. But at the end of the day, if we're looking at the constitutional position and we're looking at the institution of the House of Lords, what is its role? Its role is to act as a check on the power of the House of Commons. So we have at the moment a House of Commons which wants to consider that it has what's equivalent to the divine right. It wants to act with impunity. It doesn't want anybody getting in its way. And so it wants House of Lords reform as a result. And of course, in the process to getting to the point of House of Lords reform, it's in the process of breaking the House of Lords. But in the meantime, let's just remind ourselves once again the role of the House of Lords, because this is from the Parliament website, and it's showing the number of times the House of Lords has defeated the government in its legislative programme. Obviously, no defeats this year yet, but 60 defeats in the last session, 64, 88. As we go back through the years, we see defeat after defeat from the House of Lords, going right back to 1975 there, when there were 126 defeats for the government of the day in the House of Lords, because the House of Lords' role is to check the power of Parliament. Now, if we replace the current House of Lords, as bad as it is, with an elected chamber of Tories and Labour elected upper house, we end up with the situation where the Lords is whipped just like the Commons, and that check on the power of government is effectively removed. That's what they're aiming for, I believe, and it's a particularly dangerous situation.
Agree with that. Just to add, Mike, isn't it interesting? If you say where does the power of the Lords come from? Not, I don't mean in a constitutional sense, but the power comes from the fact that in the Lords we're still getting people having proper debate about subjects. So whereas we see almost no sensible debate in Westminster, there's just policy which is pushed through. In the Lords, we are seeing debate, and surprisingly, common sense can still seem to come to the surface of that.
Absolutely can. The House of Lords historically has done quite a lot to protect the liberties and freedoms of this country. And of course, you're not seeing this type of situation happening from anybody in the Commons. This is a delegation of Lords currently in Syria. They met with President Assad yesterday or the day before. Beside Assad there is the Reverend Andrew Ashdown, and he has organised this meeting. Baroness Cox is a crossbencher. She's there. Lord Hilton, Raymond Jolliffe. He is 84 years old, for everybody that says that all that happens in the House of Lords is you get a bunch of old people in the chamber falling asleep. Here's an 84-year-old heading off to a war zone in order to find out what is going on. He's quite happy to do that. We've also got the Reverend Michael Nazir Ali, who was formerly the Anglican Bishop of Rochester, there to find out what is actually going on in Syria. So these ladies and gents were entering Syria as Vanessa Beeley was leaving a week or so ago. And Vanessa will be on this programme on Thursday to tell us a bit about what she witnessed while she was there, what these people will be witnessing while they are there, and also to give us an update on the White Helmets who have now been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, and also to really promote the work of the real Syrian civil defence who are actually saving people's lives and, in fact, historically have been training other first responders, and until the white helmets were created, really had a very high reputation globally. So we're going to be speaking to Vanessa on Thursday. But, this is a group of lords who, I should point out, are being absolutely demolished in the mainstream media at the moment for going and meeting Assad. They are in Syria to find out the truth of what's going on there and not believing government propaganda. I don't see any backbenchers from the Commons doing this.
I haven't seen anything reported in the media either, Mike, on this. Has it been in
this? They're being totally destroyed in the media at the moment. They are having strips torn off them for daring to go and meet the war criminal Assad. The coverage of this in the mainstream media is a disgrace.
Yeah, you meet the war criminal Blair, that's okay, or the war criminal David Cameron, that's okay.
Absolutely.
But you don't want to meet Assad. David, would you like to comment on that one?
I would. From my experience, from both in Portcullis House, Parliament, and in the Lords, I have got to say that you get far more sense in the Lords than what you do in Parliament. The majority of all the Lords that I've met, corresponded with, talked over with, met in one way, shape, or form, you can get answers to questions. You can get some sort of directness. You can get some progress and a definite willingness to challenge the government and to try and do the right thing. And I've found far more of that in the Lords with the Lords that I've met. Fair enough, a couple of them were ex-chiefs of defence staff, but the overriding thing really is just how effectual they're going to be. And the one thing that sticks in my mind was a Lord and a former Chief of Defence Staff when we spoke about military union, EU military union, and what the implications were going to be in the historical thread of the policy. That his comment was to me, if the British people knew about this, they would not support it. And I said, well, that's precisely the point, is that with that message just isn't being articulated through any of the normal mainstream press or channels. This is almost as if it's, it's most secret. It's one level above top secret. So, and I've been to a lot of committee meetings in the Lords, and I've found that you can get stuff done there, and it will be talked about, and it will be debated. And that's, of course, the whole point of Parliament, is that things are spoken about. Of course, in the other side, there's more, particularly with some of the characters I've interfaced with on Defence Committee, they don't want to talk about it. Yeah, it's completely the other way. So, viva the Lords at the moment, and they've obviously got a battle on their hands if Fowler's down there trying to sort of alter the dynamic. So, well, they better stand to then, haven't they?
Yep, indeed. Okay, well, sticking with Syria here, Vanessa has published this on 21st Century War. Stop the war in Syria, don't be fooled by the propaganda. This is from Veterans for Peace. I just want to read a few bits out of this. Veterans for Peace feels great sympathy for all the victims in Syria and for all who have lost family members, friends and loved ones in this terrible war. Many of us are veterans of military conflicts that are sold to the American public with emotionally compelling but misleading messages and images. We recognize and denounce the manipulation of selected images of human suffering as propaganda used to justify yet further military violence, which will only lead to more death and suffering. Why are we not seeing images of suffering on both sides of the war in Syria? And of course, they're highlighting this famous image of the young lad. Why is an image of an injured boy used to call for yet more violence, they ask. They say the no-fly zones and safe zones that some pundits are calling for in Syria are acts of war that could lead to more violence and destruction, as happened in Libya, a nation that is virtually destroyed by a so-called humanitarian intervention. The widely seen photo of this young Syrian boy is just the latest and most graphic example of the psychological warfare being waged against public opinion in the US and worldwide. Violent extremist groups are receiving arms, training and support from the United States and the UK, we should add, and billions of dollars from Saudi Arabia and Qatar to undemocratic monarchies who have their own reasons for seeking regime change in Syria. We believe that the only way to resolve the crisis in Syria and to assist the victims of this conflict is to end the fighting, not to escalate it. The Syrian people have the right to elect their leaders, and to determine their own future. And couldn't agree more with that. And of course, the point that Assad was making when he met those lords a day or two ago was that the support of the opposition groups in Syria, the way that it's being done, that is increasing the terrorism in Syria. It has to stop.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. And we also got reports, of course, of abductions and torture, murder by groups such as Al-Nusra, which only a year ago now, a little over a year ago, we had Tory MP, as was Brooks Newmark, who was boasting that he'd had that meeting with General Idris, and the Free Syria Army was linked to Al-Nusra, were working together. So Tory party linked through to people conducting torture.
Cutting the heads off children.
Indeed. Well, just before we bring in David again, let's bring up this. Where is the violence and the war and the terrorism coming from? Well, yesterday we reported on Gulmurod Kalimov, who was a gentleman who'd been funded and trained by the US, and he was now running rogue. We'll bring that slide up again in a second. But we got this story which has emerged, that a Times reporter was abducted and shot in the feet, I think it was, in Syria. He then looks at the internet and discovers that he knows the person who did it. And of course, he was a good terrorist. So I'll just read a little bit of the report from Russia Today. It says a Times reporter who was kidnapped and shot twice in the leg in Syria claims to recognise his abductor on a recent Facebook video, which shows him in the ranks of a US-backed moderate opposition rebel group. Journalist Anthony Lloyd was captured on his way from Syria to Turkey along with a colleague, photographer Jack Hill, not far from the Syrian town of Rafat in 2014. And Anthony Lloyd said it was with some surprise watching a video of a victorious band of Western-backed rebels. I noticed the face of America's newest ally in the war against ISIS in Syria, and that is Hakim Abu Jamal, also known as Hakim Ansra, and a variety of other names. And that was the man behind the abduction. They'd known this man for 2 years. So what we can now see is that the thing is coming unravelled. We've got terrorists who are completely funded, supported. The military training is going in from the British and the Americans. And those terrorists are murdering civilians in Syria, but they're not averse to taking a couple of reporters hostage and shooting them as well. So let's bring on that other one we reported yesterday. I mean, this is becoming farcical. So we've got a man there he is, Kalimov. He's trained by the Americans. He's an expert sniper. He's trained in counter-terrorist operations. And then suddenly we are to believe he's hopped across to the other side. So the Americans put out a $3 million reward for him. So that's a bounty, $3 million. The US trained him, but now he's become a bad terrorist. It's very confusing. David?
Sorry. What struck me was, okay, you train up a terrorist, you send him over to Syria, where he mixes in amongst other terrorists, and you put a bounty on his head for $3 million. His terrorist buddies hand him over, and you give the terrorist $3 million.
That's a possibility. Or maybe he went over and talked to the other people and decided that they knew more than he did. David, what's your take on it?
It's a deliberate mess, isn't it? This isn't it's sort of back to front managing of intelligence assets. It's probably a little bit more deeper than that. So we're seeing a repeat thing, aren't we? Over many decades. So we can go back to Osama bin Laden was recruited, funded, and backed and put into Afghanistan with the Mujahideen to fight the Russians. And then we're seeing the same pattern. And then he's obviously turned at some stage. They've had a fallout and he's gone the other way. But we've seen the same with Saddam Hussein, was backed, funded, armed by the US. And that then inverted. And we've seen it time and time again with the way that, we've had this sort of regime change through Washington, particularly with Iran, and dare I say, even with Vietnam. So time and time again, we're going around in circles with this one, and people have got to start waking up. And I think this is it's interesting that Paul Craig Roberts is sort of, we need more guys like that in America to be seeing through this, because it's clearly what's happening is that America's being shorted to an extent that's the same as we're being shorted. But it's just over and over again we're seeing these characters, and it seems like, have we all got short memories or something? Do we not remember this whole scenario with Saddam? Absolutely backed, funded, recruited, back to the hilt. All of a sudden, 10 minutes later, all bets are off, and this guy's the world's biggest villain.
Yeah.
Can we really buy into this? Is this a modus operandi? Is this any way to operate? No, I don't think so.
No, it's a scam, and we better move on to the next scam, and that should be to take ourselves towards Brexit. But a soft lead in here, Mike was talking about the situation in Poland at the moment, where people are quite hostile to the immigration situation. A couple of people mentioned in the chat box yesterday about Hungary. We thought this is important, so let's bring on Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister. He's said in the Mail article here, we don't want to change the character of our country, we want to remain Hungarian to keep our religious and ethnic composition. That view isn't popular in Europe nowadays, at least amongst politicians. So we've got a remarkable man. He's Prime Minister of Hungary, and he's actually sticking up for Hungary. I wonder whether we could get a Prime Minister like that in Britain that would actually stick up for Britain.
Not a chance.
Not a chance.
Okay, so here we go. Yesterday, there was a debate in Westminster Hall. Here's the picture. This is Parliament's second biggest chamber. I don't think there's really anything to say about that. Nothing happened. There was a debate about Brexit, apparently, and whether we should hold a second referendum. Nothing was decided. A few people said some stuff, and there was no vote taken.
It's all in the picture, isn't it? There we got one man with his chin rested on his arm. We've got another one turning around, having a little chat with his colleagues. So that was all pretty relaxed. So nothing happening Brexit. And we did predict that, Mike, didn't we?
I think we did, yes.
And if we want further evidence that nothing has changed after the Brexit vote, then have a look at this. A Sun report, Migrant crackdown, Royal Navy warship HMS Diamond sent to Libya's Mediterranean coast to tackle migrant boats. So it's a migrant crackdown, as the paper picked up. And well, bye-bye Brexit, hello EU Operation Sophia. So this is a European Union operation being led by a British warship. We haven't really got any ships, so this one has supposedly been sent into warm water, Mike.
Do they tow an iceberg these days?
No, the temperature of water off the North African coast has been reduced because the British government has introduced global warming policy. It's been successful, so now we can get the warships out. But if we think about the reality, we've got a British warship designed for serious operations, apparently picking up migrants as a result of an EU operation. So we're still in the EU. But let's remember what we've been talking about. The Britain and the US have created the wars and the migration in the first place. So in the article, statistics of 100,000 migrants reaching the North Africa coast, 3,000 plus have died. More than 1 million have reached Germany, which is why the Hungarians and the Polish are getting worried. And where are these people coming from? Where they're fleeing the war zones in Syria, Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya, created by the British and Americans.
Yes. Well, this is an EU operation. And I'm delighted to say, and I do apologise for the delay on this, that finally the European Army Insight, which Dave Ellis, who's with us today, Brian, Patrick and I put together a few weeks ago. It's finally up on the UK Column website. If you are a member, go and have a look at that and give us your feedback, please.
Excellent.
Now, yesterday we were talking about Blade Runner, and here it is. It's a particularly dark-looking, well, what is it, a speedboat? It's a speedboat, but this is great because it is apparently a drone. There's been lots of coverage of it in the mainstream press. Daily Mail, The Scotsman, Daily Telegraph, The Times, they've all covered it. It's a new remote-operated speedboat. Daily Mail said that these drone speedboats could be the future of naval warfare. The Telegraph said that the Navy's new drone speedboat is a breakthrough, and it could bring about fleets of high-speed unmanned vessels. So there you go.
Could.
And Admiral Sir Philip Jones, he had this to say: the growing scale of unmanned warrior is a clear demonstration of the Royal Navy's ambition to lead and win through technological innovation. Unmanned maritime systems will change how we operate, but they're just a start. Our pursuit of new technologies and ideas, from big data to 3D printing, will ensure we remain one of those capable and successful navies in the world. So I'm just going to hand straight over to David for a comment on this.
Yeah, I mean, specifically on the drone front, there's a huge drive in sort of master global policy, three-quarter global policy here with drone procurement and the way that the policy is being managed and implemented. So we're seeing a stitch up at the committee level predominantly, and RT today, and all credit to them, have picked up on this. So well done, RT. They've drilled into it, and they're pretty much linear with what Brian and I and the rest of the UK are seeing at a base level of the money flows and the industrial flows and the policy flows. So the joint EU-US are investing heavily in drones, and this seems to be a sort of big direction, and there's a massive amount of money going to be pumped into it. But of course, it's an industrial stitch-up. So we're going to come back to the same old problems with this in terms of, how much of this work is going to go to UK companies, UK jobs, and actually the UK as a country. And as Brian and you guys rightly said there, with the EU Operation Sophia, with Diamond going down into Libya, complete misuse of that ship. It's not what it's designed for. And I would strongly suspect that that's being run out of the EU Command and Control Centre at Northwood, which is apparently across the corridor from Royal Navy HQ. So this being so, we're seeing no evidence of Brexit whatsoever. The primary, fundamental, unwavering, massive objective for the EU to obtain military union is very clear and present with what's happened here. So let's not underestimate that this seems a nice little soft, we're just going to send that destroyer down there and it's going to help with... No. What its function is a stepping stone into eating the elephant, this massive elephant, to get EU military union. So as we're seeing our Navy shorted out completely, its stocks shortened, sales of the repair ship that's just happened are clear evidence that there is absolutely no change in this drive or policy. Now the problem is, of course, is that it's not being debated, it's not being scrutinised. We're a defence committee, they're not looking at it, none of the MPs are saying anything, nothing in the mainstream press. It's a disaster for the Royal Navy. So I've got to say to Philip Jones and the rest of the Admiralty there, what we need, and what they need, unless they're doing something else, is we need to see the kind of balls that Admiral Sir Henry Leach had and Admiral Sir John Fieldhouse at the time prior to just after the Knott Review and just before the Falklands, where they literally went and kicked the door down at number 10 and told Maggie that she's not selling those through-deck cruisers, because it would be a catastrophe. So that's what we need to be seeing now from the Admiralty, is that level of oomph. And it's got to happen, otherwise there won't be a Royal Navy. It's as simple as that.
Okay, well, we just dropped this one.
We've still got this one.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Yes.
We've still got one to go. We've still got a big one to go before I drop in a little bit of black humour.
Yeah, okay. So according to The Independent here, Britain is now the second biggest arms dealer in the world. But the key point here that I wanted to ask you about, Dave, or your views on, the key point here is that 2/3 of UK weapons are being sold to the Middle East. I suppose mainly Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE. But we're exporting lots of weapons to countries where we're also fomenting war. And in the meantime, we are totally decimating our own military capability.
Absolutely, it's just completely inverted. It's a completely inverted approach. Where's the ultimate? If you look at the tactics and strategy, What Washington and the EU's objective here is, principally through a monetary banking cabal that have all the assets, all the intelligence assets at their disposal, and they're intimately acquainted right from the time of Thomas McKittrick and Alan Dulles, is that what their objective is, in order to get better economic growth, is to have European Union. And we come back to the same fundamental thing. It requires two things: common currency, and it requires military union. And once it's got military union, it will have its treasury. And once it's got its treasury, it will then have its tyrannical dictatorship through its commission and her Junkers or whoever his successor is. So any which way, this is going to be achieved. So that, this transition phase that we're going through at the moment, where you're seeing cuts to our actual Her Majesty's Armed Services, which are ours, the state. And then on the other hand, we're stirring up trouble and making a mess everywhere else, and these sort of arms sales. But that's not going to continue, because we're going to see very big shifts in global companies merging, procuring, and acquisitions. So once those money flows starts to come in, you're going to see companies starting to merge. Lockheed, Boeing, BAE, Rolls-Royce, Babcock. You're going to see some movement there in those big key companies.
Okay, right. Thank you very much for that, David. Well, we'll just bring this one in briefly, which is from our local paper, The Herald. It says, Falkland warship became party boat full of prostitutes. In fact, this is a very interesting story. So RFA Sir Lancelot, which was used in the Falklands, was later sold off. Was a cross-channel ferry, I think, at one stage, or something similar. But it then ends up in the hands of the US Navy, and former captain Daniel Dusek has been embroiled in a huge fraud case in America, in which, as part of the plea bargaining, he talks about this ship being used as a floating brothel. What is interesting about the story is, of course, it's not only involving very senior people in the American Navy, it's also mentioning, of course, counter-terrorism operations. And this brings in the so-called Black Ops merchants, Blackwater, or Z, as I think it's now known. So these are the very people you're mentioning, David. We've got a blurring now between what is bona fide national military operations and what is commercial mercenaries operating. And I think this story takes us towards the commercial mercenaries operating with the help of a few prostitutes on board a former Royal Fleet Auxiliary. Well, if we're mentioning the US, we better bring in Hillary. She's under a bit of pressure because Hillary Clinton's had to say that it's just conspiracy theories about her health. I'm not concerned about conspiracy theories. There are so many of them, I've lost track of them, and so I pay no attention to them. But why has this story come up? Well, even the Mail is now reporting that she nearly coughed herself to death at a convention in Cleveland, Ohio, to the extent that I think there was stunned silence in the audience as she hacked and coughed. Look at this woman. She is sick. Is she in a condition to become President of the United States? Morally, certainly not. Physically, I'm probably would say no. But interesting, the mainstream media's got in a bit of a spin now because they're having to introduce the word conspiracy to protect themselves. The truth is pretty powerful. Final comment, David, very short, and we must close, I think.
Well, if you had to translate that, if you had to do the translation on that and look at actually what was the more probable, what they're trying to achieve is that it's not a conspiracy, it's exactly the opposite, and that she is very worried about it.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, well, without coughing, we'll close UK Column News today. Thank you very much for joining us. And as always, if you haven't taken out a subscription with us, please consider doing that to allow us to do what we do. Thank you very much, David, for joining us. Thank our audience for joining us. We'll be back at 1 o'clock tomorrow. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.